Sit back and throw one back with your pinky in the air and a middle finger to the world, and join me, the eclectic gentleman Stephen Watts, as we look back on this day in pro wrestling history. But before we do, put that drink down, like, share, and subscribe, and without further ado, let's get our wrestling history on. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, it is July 31st, and we're going to start off as we always do on a positive note. That's right, these are your pro wrestling birthdays. 1931, Japanese legend, Dick the Destroyer Bayer. 1962, it's people power, it's John Laurinaitis. 1969, ECW original, Kid Cash. And last but not least, 1984, the luchador known as Tejano Jr. Of course, on the flip side of that coin, your pro wrestling deaths for July 31st, 2015, the Hot Rod, Roddy Piper. Alright, enough of the sad stuff. It's time to get to the meat and potatoes. That's right, these are your pro wrestling history highlights for July 31st. Jumping in the Wayback Machine and going to 1959, where we see Dick Gunkel defeat Fred Blassie for the NWA Southern Heavyweight title in Atlanta, Georgia, ending Blassie's 9th run with that title and starting Gunkel's 2nd. Leaping to the 70s, 1973, Tim Woods defeats Paul Jones for the NWA Florida Heavyweight title in Tampa, ending the 2nd title reign for Jones. 3 years later in 1976, Hurricane Castillo defeats Jose Lothario and Bayamon, Puerto Rico for the Caribbean Heavyweight title. Our final stop in the 70s, 1979, Pampiro Firpo defeats Abdul the Butcher to win the WWC Puerto Rico Heavyweight title. Grabbing my boombox and going to the 80s, 1984, the WWF holds their first ever TV taping at the Mid-Hudson Civic Center in Poughkeepsie, New York, a venue that would become a regular haunt for their tapings for many, many years. The championship wrestling taping featured Piper's Pit with numerous guests including Kamala and Brian Blair, as well as an angle where Wendy Richter, after being presented with a new WWF Women's Championship, was attacked by the Fabulous Moolah. Sticking in 1984, Giant Baba defeats Stan Hansen to win the PWF World Heavyweight title in Tokyo, Japan, starting his 4th and final reign with the title. Jumping ahead 2 years but sticking in Japan, this time All Japan Pro Wrestling ran a show at the Budokan Hall, headlined by Stan Hansen defeating Jumbo Tsuruta for the NWA International Heavyweight title. The card also saw Hiro Saito defeat Brad Armstrong in a tournament final to determine the first PWF World Junior Heavyweight Champion, and Riki Choshu defeating Killer Khan in a death match. Moving ahead to 1988, Jumbo Tsuruta and Yatsu defeat Stan Hansen and Terry Gordy in Japan to win the All Japan Tag Team titles for a 2nd time. Sticking in 1988, WWF held their WrestleFest event in the Milwaukee County Stadium in Wisconsin, with a main event of Hulk Hogan defeating Andre the Giant in a steel cage match when Hogan climbed out of the cage after hitting Andre with a leg drop. Grabbing my flannel and going to the decade of grunge, 1992, the Ebony Experience, Booker T and Stevie Ray, later known as Harlem Heat, defeat Gary Young and Steve Dane to win the Global Wrestling Federation Tag Team titles in Dallas, Texas. On the same show, Alex Pertot defeats Terry Sims for the GWF Light Heavyweight title. Those were your short but sweet pro wrestling history highlights for July 31st. I'm the eclectic gentleman Stephen Watts, and we'll see you tomorrow.